My daughter called me her best friend growing up. But as she climbed higher in her career, she started introducing her stepfather as the one who really shaped her mindset. I wasn't mentioned in her big company bio, but just a photo of her with him and a caption that read, "Couldn't have made it without you, Dad." I assumed it was probably because she was just too fond of him. But when it was time for her wedding, she didn't invite me. What happened next was rather unexpected. I will tell you everything. First, if you enjoy stories like this, you want to be part of the 10% of our viewers who click on the like button. This really makes us happy. If you are yet to subscribe to our channel, kindly support us today by subscribing to this channel. This helps us to bring you more beautiful stories. It will be great to tell us where you are watching us from in the comments section. Now let's get into the details of the story. When she was little, my daughter used to call me her midnight buddy. It started when she was 9, woke up one night crying after a nightmare, and I didn't know what else to do but say, "Want to get pancakes?" We lived in a quiet suburb back then, just me and her in a small 2-bedroom apartment where the air conditioner rattled like it was trying to shake the loneliness out of the walls. I remember that first night clear as day. Me in sweats, her in her pink unicorn pajamas, climbing into the front seat with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. We drove to this cheap diner that never changed the light bulbs, and over chocolate chip pancakes, she told me about the shadowy monster in her dream. I listened, nodding like it was the most important thing I'd ever heard. And in that moment, it probably was. Because that's what you do when you're both mother and father, when you're trying to fill every role in the play with a one-man cast. I never told her I had $30 left in the bank that night. I just let her order extra whipped cream. As the years went on, that diner became our place. Straight A's? Pancakes. First heartbreak? Pancakes. Stress before exams, late-night freakouts about the future, random cravings after midnight? Always pancakes. There were nights I was bone-tired from work, coming home with grease on my hands and my back screaming from double shifts at the auto shop. But if she looked at me with those wide, hopeful eyes, I'd grab the keys without hesitation. She used to say I was her best friend. She'd write me little notes on sticky pads. "Thanks for being the best dad ever. Love you more than syrup." I kept them all in a shoebox in my closet, right next to old report cards and the drawings she made me in elementary school. The box got heavier every year, and I never stopped adding to it. I didn't think it was possible to love someone that deeply, that completely. I didn't date much, didn't go out, didn't take trips. My world was her, and honestly, I never wanted it any other way. When she got accepted to college, full ride, academic scholarship, I cried in the parking lot of the admissions office. She didn't see me, of course. I waited until she and her friends had gone inside for orientation. But I sat in my truck, hands gripping the steering wheel, tears sliding down my cheeks because I was just so damn proud. And scared. Not of her failing. No, never that. But of what it would mean to let go. Of waking up and not hearing her brushing her teeth. Not seeing her shoes by the door. Not arguing over who left the milk out. I spent 18 years pouring everything I had into her. And I realized in that moment that the hardest part of parenting wasn't the work. It was watching them fly and knowing you couldn't follow. Still, I smiled when she turned to wave at me that day. I waved back. She didn't see the tears. College changed her in the ways I expected it would. More independent, busier, harder to pin down for a phone call. But we still had our thing. Every month, no matter how slammed she was, we had remote pancakes. She'd go to a diner near campus. I'd go to one near home, and we'd video call while we ate. It wasn't the same, but it kept the thread intact. We'd talk about her professors, internships, some guy she was dating that week. I didn't always know what to say. There's a big generational gap between auto repair and marketing analytics, but I listened. Always listened. And every now and then, she'd pause and smile and say, "Still my midnight buddy." And that was enough to keep me going through the silence between calls, the growing distance I tried not to feel. After graduation, she moved back home for a while. I offered, told her she could stay rent-free until she got on her feet. She was working long hours, grinding hard, trying to break into her field. I helped where I could, coached her through interviews, edited her cover letters, even called in a favor with a buddy of mine whose sister worked in HR at a firm she admired. She got the job. High-rise office downtown, great benefits, company card. She came home glowing, arms full of branded swag, and I remember her hugging me so tight it hurt. "You're the best, Dad," she said. "Couldn't have done this without you." I didn't cry that time. I just held her and nodded like my heart wasn't about to explode. The money from my retirement fund helped with her car. A nice sedan, reliable, good mileage. She said she felt bad about accepting it, but I brushed her off. "It's what dads do," I told her. "Besides, I don't want you breaking down on the freeway in heels." She laughed. We made pancakes that night. Extra whipped cream. I really thought, we were still us. Just a little older, a little more tired, but still connected. Still a team. I was wrong. I just didn't know it yet. I first noticed it during one of her podcast interviews. She'd landed some recognition, 30 under 30, or something like that, and a business influencer invited her on to talk about leadership and perseverance. I was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of black coffee, the kind that's bitter no matter how much sugar you pour in, watching the video on my phone. She looked confident, professional. I smiled when she introduced herself, until she started describing her upbringing. "I was lucky to have a strong figure who always pushed me to aim higher," she said, and my chest swelled for a moment, thinking she meant me. But then she added, "My stepdad's discipline and drive really shaped my mindset. He taught me how to think long-term, how to stay sharp. I owe so much of my success to him." I didn't move, didn't sip my coffee, just stared at the screen like maybe I'd misheard. But I hadn't. She never mentioned me, not once. Not the resume reviews at 2 a.m., not the practice interviews, not the nights I stayed up triple-checking her student loan options. Just him. I'll be honest, it wasn't just the omission that gutted me. It was the rewriting. Like I'd been edited out of a story I'd written by hand. I knew she'd reconnected with her stepfather a few years ago, after her mom remarried. I never had a problem with that. I told her as much. "You can have space for more than one dad," I'd said. And I meant it. I really did. I wasn't afraid of sharing her. I was afraid of being replaced. But I kept that part to myself because it sounded weak, petty. I told myself that love doesn't compete. That being the man who raised her would always mean something. But that podcast felt like a quiet, public burial, and I was the one being lowered into the ground while she handed the shovel to someone else. I tried to bring it up once, gently. We were having dinner, takeout Thai on the living room floor, like we used to when the power went out. I asked her how the podcast went, and she lit up. "Great reception, like, I gained over 200 followers in a day. Crazy, right?" I nodded, waited a beat, then said, "Heard it too. You sounded sharp." She smiled. "Thanks, Dad." I stirred my noodles, then added, "Just noticed I didn't come up in the conversation. Thought maybe I would." She paused, blinked like I'd just said something in another language. "Oh, yeah. I mean, it was more focused on mentorship and stuff. I didn't want to go into personal stuff too deep. I let that sit in the air between us." "Right?" I said, setting down my fork. Just figured all those years of mentoring counted for something. She laughed, and said, "Dad, don't be weird about it." And that was the end of it. She moved on to talking about the influencer's next event. I sat there and felt like someone had turned down the volume on my life. It kept happening in little ways after that. Her social media posts started to shift. More professional, more curated. Fine, that's to be expected. But it was the captions that got to me. She'd post a throwback to her college graduation and tag her stepdad. "Thanks for the push when I didn't believe in myself." She'd post a photo of her new office view and caption it, "Proof that tough love works. Grateful for the man who taught me to chase big." Comments would roll in. "You've always had a great dad. Love how close you two are." She'd heart those comments. She wouldn't correct anyone. And me? I wasn't in the frame. Not in the feed. Not even in the story highlights. Still, I stayed supportive. She was living in the house I'd transferred into her name. My idea, my gift when she graduated. Said she deserved a safe place to land while she built her future. I was still covering insurance on the car, still helping with surprise expenses like medical bills or tax confusion. I never said no. Not once. And I kept all the screenshots. Every "thank you" that started to sound more and more like an obligation. Every holiday card with a pre-printed signature. I kept hoping it was a phase. That once the noise died down, once the success settled, she'd circle back. Remember, but people don't go backward when forward feels more flattering. She liked the way her new story sounded, and I wasn't in it. The breaking point came when a business magazine reached out to do a feature on her. Big piece. Cover photo, glossy spread, the works. She was excited, bubbling with energy in the kitchen as she told me all about the interview questions. I was genuinely proud. I took a photo of her while she was talking, the light from the window making her hair look golden, her hands moving in that animated way she always had. I almost cried, watching her. My little girl, so grown up, so vibrant, so successful. I didn't even care if I got mentioned, just wanted her to know I saw her, that I loved her. The article came out 2 weeks later. I bought 3 copies at the grocery store, rushed home, and flipped through it like a kid on Christmas. I wasn't in it. Not even in passing. But there was a full-page photo of her and her stepfather, arm in arm, with a bold caption at the bottom. Couldn't have made it without you, Dad. That was the first time I didn't eat dinner that night. I just sat on the porch until it got too dark to see my hands. I wish I could say I confronted her then and there, that I told her she'd hurt me. But I didn't. I didn't know how. How do you look at someone you raised, someone you built your world around, and say, why am I no longer enough for you? It sounds desperate, small, and I was still clinging to hope. Maybe it was PR. Maybe her stepdad helped with something I didn't know about. Maybe I was being sensitive. But deep down I knew. I was no longer part of her identity. I was just the scaffolding she took down once the building was complete. It started with silence, no grand announcement, no mailed invitation, not even a text that hinted at something coming. At first, I thought I had missed something. Maybe she told me in passing and I'd forgotten. Or maybe it slipped through the cracks of our increasingly brief conversations. I scrolled through our texts one afternoon just to be sure. Weeks of surface-level exchanges. How's the car? Can I send over that document again? Busy week, I'll call later. There was nothing. No save the date. No mention of a ring. No talk of dress fittings or venues. I knew she'd been dating someone steadily, a guy she'd mentioned briefly months ago, but I didn't even know his last name. And yet, according to a Facebook post from one of her college friends, she was getting married in less than 2 weeks. The caption read, "Can't wait to celebrate the union of 2 amazing souls." That was how I found out. A public post from someone I hadn't seen since her graduation barbecue. I sat there in my recliner, staring at my phone like it might rewrite itself if I waited long enough. The hum of the refrigerator in the next room was the only sound, and suddenly the house felt like it had swallowed itself whole. I reread the post. I clicked on her profile. There were more clues. A photo of a bridal shower I hadn't been invited to, comments from friends about how beautiful the venue looked, a boomerang of her trying on wedding heels. My chest tightened. Not with anger, not yet, but with that old, familiar ache of being outside the circle of someone you once shared everything with. I tried not to overreact. Told myself there had to be a reason. Maybe she was planning to surprise me with an invite. Maybe the whole thing had been rushed, last minute, unplanned. I held on to that hope like a man gripping a fraying rope, refusing to admit he's falling. But then the pictures came. A full album, sent from her number, without warning. I opened them slowly, as if they might bite. The first was of her in a white dress, beaming. She looked breathtaking. My throat closed. The second was her with the groom, smiling so wide it almost looked unreal. Then came the wedding party, the venue, the cake. And finally, a photo of her and her stepfather. He was walking her down the aisle, his arm linked with hers, his expression proud and full. The caption underneath read, "Had the best time with my favorite people. No, wish you were here. No, sorry you couldn't make it. Just finality." Like the message wasn't for me, it was to me. A declaration. I wasn't among her favorite people. I wasn't even part of the story anymore. I didn't respond right away. What could I say? Congratulations? I'm so happy for you. I'm devastated you didn't think I belonged there. I didn't trust myself to reply without bleeding all over the screen. I set my phone down and stared at the floor for what felt like an hour. The room spun with memories. Me tying her shoes before kindergarten, teaching her to ride a bike in the park, standing outside in the freezing cold while she went door to door selling cookies for some fundraiser I can't even remember now. I had been there for every play, every fever, every heartbreak. And yet, somehow, I hadn't earned a seat at her wedding. Not even a seat in the back. Eventually, I did text her. I kept it short, cold. Thanks for the pictures. Wishing you both the best. She replied almost immediately. Didn't want to make things awkward with Mom. You understand, right? That was her explanation. Not that I'd done anything wrong. Not that I was volatile or rude or had ever caused a scene. Just that I made things awkward by existing. I didn't reply. I couldn't. My fingers hovered over the screen for minutes, but anything I might have typed would have felt either too soft or too explosive. So I said nothing. And in the silence that followed, something inside me began to harden. I went into the garage later that evening, looking for something to do with my hands. That's what I do when I don't want to feel. Turn wrenches, reorganize toolboxes, pretend I'm fixing something that isn't broken. I ended up sitting in the old camping chair by the workbench, staring at the car I'd helped her buy. I remembered the day we picked it out. She was nervous, asking if it was too much, and I laughed and said, "Nothing's too much for you, kiddo." I co-signed the loan. Paid off the rest as a graduation gift. The paperwork was still in my filing cabinet. That car had taken her to job interviews, company events, weekend trips with friends. And yet, the man who gave it to her wasn't even worth a mention in her wedding vows. The house she lived in now? That was mine too. Or had been. I'd signed the deed over to her name the year she started her job. She'd cried, told me it was too much, that she couldn't accept it. But she had. She moved in, made it hers. I told myself I didn't need credit. I didn't need recognition. That's what fathers do. They give, without asking for applause. But this felt different. This felt like being erased. Like I was the scaffolding she used to climb to the top, and then discarded once the building stood tall. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at the dining room table, the wedding photos still open on my phone, the caption replaying in my mind like a haunting chorus. Favorite people. Not me. I was done telling myself stories about being included later. About things changing. About being remembered. I didn't want to be part of her curated life anymore. Not the version where I was invisible unless she needed something. That's when the thought first formed, not out of spite, but out of clarity. She's living in a house I gave her, driving a car I paid for, and I didn't even make the guest list. The thought scared me at first. Then it settled into my chest like a key finally clicking into the right lock. I stood up, went to my computer, and opened a real estate listing site. The house would be on the market by morning. I listed the house quietly, without drama, without warning. It felt surgical, not spiteful. The kind of decision you make after every emotional nerve has gone numb and all that's left is bone-level logic. I didn't even call her first. I just met with a realtor, walked him through the property like it wasn't filled with echoes of my daughter's laughter, and signed the paperwork. The place still had her framed degrees on the walls, her coffee maker on the kitchen counter, her dog's toys scattered across the living room rug, but I saw none of it as permanent anymore. Not after the wedding. Not after that caption. She may have decorated it, but I built the foundation, paid the taxes, maintained the plumbing when it backed up, replaced the water heater when she called crying on a Sunday. That house didn't just have my money in it. It had my fingerprints on every wall. And now it was mine again. The eviction notice was delivered by mail and email. I gave her 60 days, more than legally required. I even included a polite note, something like, "I'll need to reclaim the property for personal reasons. Please make arrangements accordingly." It was the most measured way I could say, "I'm done financing your life while you write me out of it." I waited, not anxiously, but with a strange sense of detachment. I wasn't angry, not really. Anger had burned through me weeks ago and left ash behind. This was something colder. Final. Like closing the door of a room you'd long outgrown. She didn't reply for a few days. Then, one Saturday afternoon, my doorbell rang. She showed up without calling, something she hadn't done in years. She stood on my porch like she used to when she was in high school, coming home late from a friend's party, eyes wide, posture half defiant. But this time, there was no sheepishness, just outrage. "What the hell is this?" she demanded, holding the notice like it was a betrayal wrapped in legalese. I didn't invite her in. just leaned against the doorway and met her stare. "It's an eviction notice," I said plainly. "You're living in a property I gave you. I'm taking it back." Her mouth fell open. "You gave me that house." I nodded. "And I can reclaim it. I never put it solely in your name for this exact reason." She laughed then, sharp and bitter. "So what? You're punishing me?" "Because I didn't throw you a parade at my wedding." My hand stayed at my sides. Calm. I'd rehearsed this moment in my head, not because I wanted to lash out, but because I knew it would come. "No," I said. "I'm doing this because I've finally accepted my place in your life. You made it very clear who you consider your real father. And that's fine. That's your choice. But don't expect me to bankroll a life I'm no longer part of." She stepped back like I'd slapped her. "You're being spiteful." I shook my head. "No, I'm being done." The words surprised even me with their finality. Her expression cracked, some mix of disbelief and grief flickering across her face. But I didn't move. I didn't soften. Because I couldn't keep doing this. Giving, hoping, disappearing. She tried a different angle then. Softer, more measured. "You really think this is about replacing you? You really believe I don't love you just because I didn't put your name in some article?" I didn't answer that right away. Instead, I looked at her, the same girl I raised, the same girl who used to dance in the living room in her socks, who once cried on my chest after her first rejection letter. And I said, "It's not about an article. It's about the pattern. You wrote me out of your story the minute it became convenient. You needed me when it was hard. And now that it's not, I'm a ghost. Well, ghosts don't pay for homes. Or insurance. Or your silence." She didn't cry. I wasn't sure if that was a relief or just more proof of how far apart we'd grown. She stared at me like she was trying to find the version of me she used to trust, the version that would have folded the second her voice wavered. But he was gone. He'd watched his daughter get married through a screen. He'd read a caption that told him he wasn't one of her favorite people. He wasn't angry, just finished. She finally asked, "So what now? You just throw me out." I shook my head. "You've got 60 days. You'll land on your feet. You always do." She turned then, storming back to her car, and I didn't stop her. I didn't watch her drive away. I closed the door, walked to the kitchen, and made myself a cup of coffee. I drank it in silence. No shaking hands. No second-guessing. Just quiet. That was the moment I realized something important. Sometimes choosing yourself feels like abandonment. But it's not. It's rescue. Not from them. From the version of you that kept bleeding to make everyone else comfortable. That man had done enough. That man needed rest. Over the next few days, the texts started. Long messages about how I was overreacting, how I was being petty, how I'd misunderstood her choices. I read them all. Didn't reply. One said, "You're ruining our relationship over nothing." I almost laughed at that. Ruining what? A ghost doesn't ruin anything by walking away. I started preparing the house for the rental listing. Fixed the front steps. Touched up the paint. Every chore felt like a cleansing, like I was wiping off years of invisible compromise. The more I cleaned, the lighter I felt. I didn't miss her presence. I missed the version of her who loved me openly. But that version hadn't existed in a long time. When the house finally hit the market, I looked at the listing photo of the front door and felt something shift. This wasn't just about reclaiming property. It was about reclaiming peace. My peace. I'd spent years tying my worth to her milestones. Now, I was learning to untie the knot. She was building a life that didn't include me. I was finally building one that didn't depend on her recognition. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was losing anything. I felt like I was finally getting something back. The backlash didn't come all at once. It trickled in, slow and passive at first, like water slipping under a door before the storm really breaks. It started with her mother. She called me one afternoon, her voice all sugar and strain, the kind she reserved for when she was trying to sound composed while also hiding judgment. "Hey," she said, drawing the word out like we were still on friendly terms. We hadn't spoken in over a year, not since the last time she tried to explain to me how blended families can be complicated. I already knew that. I was living in the fallout. "So, I heard about the house," she continued. "Are you really evicting your own daughter?" I leaned back in my chair, phone pressed to my ear, watching a squirrel dart across the backyard fence like even it didn't want to be involved in this mess. "I am," I said flatly. No explanations. No apologies. Just the truth. She sighed heavily, like I was a child who'd spilled juice on the carpet. Don't you think that's the bit extreme? She's your daughter. The words were so familiar, so rehearsed, like they'd been passed around in a family group chat I wasn't part of. She's your daughter. As if that alone meant I owed her endless grace without reciprocity. As if biology canceled out betrayal. I kept my voice even. She's an adult. She made her choices. Now I'm making mine. That didn't sit well. Her tone sharpened. You're acting like a wounded little boy. She has a right to connect with her stepfather. That doesn't mean she doesn't value you. I almost laughed at that, but not because it was funny. Because it was absurd. She didn't invite me to her wedding. She gave him credit for everything I did. And now you want to talk about value? There was a long silence on the other end. Then she said, you know what? You'll regret this. And hung up. The real storm came a few days later, after she'd posted a carefully worded message on her social media accounts. It wasn't an attack, not overtly. She was smarter than that. It was a soft, manipulative paragraph about boundaries and letting go of toxic energy, paired with a photo of her and her stepdad smiling in a park. The caption read, some people don't know how to handle your growth when they can't control your narrative. Grateful for the real ones who've been there through it all. The comments section lit up. Friends and colleagues chimed in with sympathy, praise, and vague jabs that were clearly aimed at me. Cutting off toxicity is self-care. The ones who matter will support you, not try to control you. I didn't comment, didn't call, but I read every word, and each one was like a quiet punch to the chest. Not because they hurt, exactly, but because it was so clear that she didn't just want space. She wanted to be the victim in a story where I had only ever been the one holding the umbrella in her storm. Then came the email. A long, emotionally charged piece of writing that oscillated between guilt-tripping and gaslighting like a metronome. She opened with, I never thought I'd have to write something like this to my own father. Then launched into paragraphs about how I'd always been intense, how she felt pressured to perform under my love, how I never really understood her, and how her stepdad gave her the emotional safety I apparently lacked. She accused me of resenting her success, of weaponizing my generosity, and of trying to make her feel indebted for every little thing. The part that hit hardest wasn't the rewriting of our history. It was the way she framed my love as conditional, performative, like my sacrifices were some kind of manipulation tactic, and not the pure, aching truth of a father who had given everything because he didn't know how to give anything less. I read it 3 times. The first time, I was stunned. The second time, angry. The third time, numb. And then I closed the laptop and stood in the kitchen staring out the window, letting the silence of the house surround me. There was no one here to hear my side. No crowd of witnesses to validate my pain. Just me and the soft click of the refrigerator and the knowledge that love, real love, gets no guarantee of loyalty in return. That you can give someone your life, and they can still decide to rewrite the script with you on the cutting room floor. I didn't reply to the email. I wanted to. God, I wanted to type out every sleepless night, every sacrifice, every moment I'd swallowed my hurt, so she wouldn't feel guilty for growing up. But I knew what that would turn into. A volley, a debate, a tug of war over who loved more. And I was tired. So I let the silence be my answer. A few days later, I got a text from one of her cousins, someone I hadn't spoken to in months. Heard what happened. Just want you to know I see you. I remember everything you did for her. I didn't respond. I just sat down on the back porch with a beer and let the weight of being seen settle into my bones like sunlight after weeks of rain. It didn't fix anything, but it reminded me I wasn't crazy. As the move-out date approached, her texts became more logistical. Cold. I'll need until the end of the week. Is the landlord okay with me leaving some furniture? Can I use the garage for storage until next month? I replied in short, polite sentences. No emotion. No invitations to reconnect. That ship had sailed, capsized, and sunk. One evening, she left a key in my mailbox. No note. No goodbye. I walked through the empty house the next day, bare walls and echoing rooms, and felt a strange mixture of sadness and freedom. The rooms weren't full of pain. They were just quiet, like the grief had finally stepped out with her. I rented it out within the month. Good tenants. Young couple, expecting their first child. When they walked through and said, "This place feels like it's been loved," I smiled and nodded. "Yeah," I said. "It has." I didn't tell them who lived there before. That chapter was closed. Not erased, but sealed. I wasn't pretending she didn't exist. I was just choosing not to let her take up the whole story anymore. That was my gift to myself. The final line I wouldn't let anyone cross. The house had been rented out for nearly 3 months before the silence stopped feeling like punishment and started feeling like peace. At first, I expected some kind of ripple effect, more angry calls, maybe a dramatic pop-up at my door, or at least a last-ditch message begging for some twisted version of closure. But none came. The doorbell never rang. Her number stopped lighting up my phone. And the inbox that once carried waves of guilt now held only spam and the occasional bill reminder. The quiet felt unfamiliar at first, like wearing a coat you hadn't earned. But over time, it stopped pressing against my chest. It fit me, gave me space to breathe without explaining myself to someone who had already written me out of her story. I started to realize that the grief I'd been carrying wasn't just about losing my daughter's affection. It was about losing the illusion that it had ever been unconditional. It's strange what lingers after a person is gone. Not physically, but emotionally. I would drive past that diner we used to go to for pancakes at midnight, and for a second, I'd expect to see her sitting in our usual booth, sipping coffee she always said she hated. I found one of her old t-shirts at the back of the laundry closet, soft and faded, with a university logo across the front. I held it like it was a letter, not the apology kind, the kind that says, "I was here once." Those moments didn't break me. They just reminded me that we'd had something real, once. Before everything turned into performance. Before gratitude became politics. Before fatherhood became a public relations problem to be managed, minimized, rewritten. People asked questions, of course. My brother called me one night, voice full of that cautious concern men have when they're trying to poke at grief without making it bleed. "You and her doing okay?" He asked, like the answer might change based on how kindly he phrased the question. I paused. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because the truth felt too raw to offer up without some kind of buffer. Eventually, I just said, "We're not talking right now." He didn't press. He just made a sound in the back of his throat and said, "Well, I hope it gets better." But I didn't hope. That was the difference. Hope had felt like loyalty for too long. Like a favor I kept giving her for free, with nothing in return. I'd stopped hoping. Not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. Sometimes letting go wasn't an ending. It was a correction. I took small steps toward building something for myself again. Nothing dramatic. I started fixing up the backyard, replanted the flower beds, repainted the fence. Took a woodworking class down at the community center. There was a man there named Henry, about my age, who'd been through something similar with his son. We didn't talk about it much, not directly, but every now and then, while sanding down pieces of oak or lining up a dovetail joint, one of us would say something like, "Funny how they forget birthdays but remember to ask for money," and the other would grunt in agreement. It wasn't therapy, but it was honest. And sometimes honesty feels more like healing than all the apologies in the world. One day, a letter arrived from her. Handwritten. The envelope had my name in neat, careful script. Her handwriting, always round and precise. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. Part of me expected rage. Another part expected redemption. It was neither. Inside, she wrote about how she was navigating complex emotions, about how she never intended to hurt me, and how she was still trying to understand the layers of our past. No sorry. No thank you. Just a vague acknowledgement that something had broken and maybe one day she'd get around to looking at the pieces. I read it twice, then folded it and put it in the back of the drawer with the other things I couldn't throw away but didn't want in plain view. What surprised me most was how little the letter moved me. There was a time I would have read something like that and built a whole future around it. Imagined a reunion. Imagined her sitting across from me in the diner again, smiling like none of this had happened. But this time, I didn't do that. I didn't take her half-built bridge and try to finish it on my own. I just let it be what it was, unfinished, unsure, and not my responsibility to repair. I thought about texting her once. Not to reignite anything, but just to say I got the letter. Maybe that I appreciated the effort. But the moment passed. It felt unnecessary. Like saying thank you to someone who bumped into you and didn't apologize. I'd spent so much of my life giving her the benefit of the doubt that I forgot I was allowed to have doubts of my own. I wasn't angry anymore. I just didn't feel obligated to reattach myself to someone who only saw me as an asset when it was convenient. That realization was quiet, not triumphant, just solid, like a door that finally latched after years of swinging open in every storm. A few weeks ago, someone sent me another photo from her social media, a group shot at some awards dinner. She was front and center, gleaming in a designer dress, holding a plaque. Her stepfather stood next to her, arm around her shoulders. The caption read, "To the man who never let me settle. You made me fearless." I stared at it for a long time, not because it hurt this time, but because it didn't. There was no expectation, no sting, just a sense of finality. My name wasn't in the caption. And that was fine. I didn't need to be in the caption to know what I had done. I had raised a girl from scraped knees to scholarships. I had driven through snowstorms to bring her forgotten textbooks. I had waited outside dance recitals with flowers even when my paycheck barely covered rent. I had packed lunches, reviewed essays, stayed up during all-night panic attacks, and built a home where she never had to question whether she was loved. That doesn't vanish just because someone edits the photo. I'll probably always love her. That kind of love doesn't dissolve. It just reshapes itself. But I love myself more now. Not in a loud, selfish way. Just in a quiet, necessary one. I gave her everything. And now, finally, I'm giving something back to myself. If you've ever been written out of someone's life after building it with your own two hands, this story was for you. Sometimes, the hardest part isn't the betrayal. It's accepting that love doesn't always guarantee loyalty. But walking away to protect your peace isn't petty. It's power. If this story resonated with you, drop a comment below and tell us what part hit home, because your story deserves to be heard too. And if you want more real, raw stories like this one, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. This channel is where truth has a voice. See you soon in the next story.